Every year, there's a great release that comes out. It's exciting, right? A new dial, a new case, a new movement, a new color, a new complication. And us as watch enthusiasts, we can get excited about that new release. And it's a really fun thing to be a watch enthusiast. I mean, this is a great time that we are enjoying this hobby together in. But occasionally, there's a watch that comes out that's more than just exciting. It's special. And watch enthusiasts, along with non-watch enthusiasts, really see the draw and the appeal. And I think that's the goal for any watch brand. They want to cater to the most enthusiastic of their consumer base, the watch enthusiasts. But more importantly, they want the business from non-watch enthusiasts, people that just want a very nice, very beautiful watch. Those watches attain icon status to where you think of a brand, you think of that model. And right now, I think for Grand Seiko, that model is the Snowflake. And rightly so. It's a lovely watch. It's one that I have reviewed and that I think is impressive. It's also flawed. And this Grand Seiko, this SLGH005 White Birch, improves upon those elements I think that are lacking in very great current releases from Grand Seiko, including the Snowflake. But it's also far more expensive at $9,100 full retail. That is a pretty penny. This is a pretty watch, yes. But is it worth the cost? I'm going to share my opinions. We're going to talk about the good. We're going to talk about the bad. We're going to talk about the details here. But before we do that, before we talk about where Grand Seiko sits in the current market moving forward, I want to shout out my father. My father, Bruce Williams Sr., just purchased this piece. And this is significant for him. He's a relatively new watch collector. His daily wear is an Omega Seamaster Professional black dial. It's a lovely watch. I love that watch. And for a couple years now, he's been searching for the perfect complement, a dressy complement for his everyday piece. And he's looked at other Grand Seiko, he's looked at Cartier, he's looked at JLC, but it wasn't until this White Birch released, this Shirakawa came out, that he knew this is special. This is the watch for him. So I want to shout out my father, my dad, Bruce Williams Sr., for a great purchase. And Dad, you really have a lovely duo here, a 1-2 punch of great, beautiful, iconic watches that I think fit you really well. So my dad purchased this from Royal Jewelers in Andover, Massachusetts. He had them send it to me. I am fortunate enough to review it, to film it, photograph it, share it with you guys, and then I'm going to be sending it on to my father to enjoy. So if you want to give him a compliment in the comment section of the video, I think he would get a kick out of that. So let's talk about this watch and what is special about this. I think it is definitely too early to tell whether this watch will attain that icon status. That's more than just being an exciting new release and a fun dial, combination, color combination. It's too early to tell, but this has the capacity to do so. This is better. This is nicer. This is noticeably a step up above previous Grand Seikos that I've owned or reviewed or borrowed. So what's special about this? Let's talk about the new movement. Let's start there, then we'll go to other aspects of the watch. This is the 9S-A5 high beat movement. So this is a true high beat. And there's not a lot of brands that are making true high beat movements now. Really, Grand Seiko is the leader. Zenith is right there too. This ticks at 36,000 beats per hour, or 10 beats every second, 5 hertz. We have 47 joules and an 80-hour power reserve, which is very impressive for a high beat movement. That is attained through improved escapement efficiency, and that power reserve is stored in twin barrels. We have a free sprung balance with variable inertia regulation, so there are no Edicron regulating pins. And that is so nice to see at this price. This is akin to what Rolex does, or what Lange does, or Glashütte. What variable inertia regulation is really are very small screws that are set within the balance that a watchmaker can adjust to change the inertia and thereby regulate the movement. It's beautiful. And I want to note that this watch, you can tell that the designers, they wanted to be technically superior and impressive when it comes to specs, power reserve, shock protection, and all that. But more importantly, they want the end user, the consumer, to be lost in the beauty, in the architecture, In the layout, we have a skeletonized rotor. We have very lovely finish work. There is Geneva striping. There is anglage. There is perlage. There is black polished screws. And I think you guys will agree with me. This looks very good. The movement is adjusted in 6 different positions, 6 different temperatures. We have an acceptable daily deviation rate of -5 to +3 seconds per day, which is a little bit tighter than COC levels of specification, and it's also adjusted to an extra position over what the COSC does. Here's the nice thing though, it's 15% thinner than previous mechanical calibers, which allows Grand Seiko to trim out the case and allow for a more elegant feel on wrist. That has been my criticism of Grand Seiko for years now, is that their very dressy, beautiful watches are, as thick as a dive watch, 13 millimeters in height, which is not something you want to see when you're spending $3, $4, $5, $6, $9,000 on a watch. You don't want to have to live with anything. And I know I have in the past say, oh yeah, the height, it doesn't bother me. You don't notice it. But deep down inside, it does bother me. It would be a better watch if it was thinner. And so this new movement, this beautiful, superior movement is thinner, and that is greatly affecting the watch, the overall package, and the experience of the end user. Now, not only is it beautiful and thin and impressive when it comes to accuracy and adjustment and power reserve and all of that stuff, notice this curved bridge here. It's not completely curvaceous. Like, there is a little bit of irregularity to the shape. And what that is, this bridge is reflecting the shape of Mount Iwate, which is nearby the Grand Seiko studio where this caliber was designed and manufactured. And so I just love that. I love the fact that Grand Seiko, they can tie regional elements of nature in with their, art level mechanical pieces of men's jewelry that tell us the time. They blend watchmaking with nature in such a subtle way that I don't necessarily see from other brands. Other brands might say, hey, yeah, this is inspired by this or that, but Grand Seiko does it. They've done it with the Snowflake. They've done it with the Four Seasons collection. They've done it with other models, and it's also found on the dial of this watch. And so let's go in on a macro level and take a look at this highly texturized dial. This was inspired by the white birch trees that grow near that Grand Seiko studio in northern Japan. And it's dominant. It's eye-catching. It looks good in natural light. It looks good under LED lights. And then when there is one source of light that's very dramatic, you guys can see the undulation of the dial. It becomes emphasized. And again, you can kind of get lost when you're looking at your watch to tell the time because of how sharp this is and how different this is. You don't see watches like this very often. And I think that also enhances the reasons why this is special. Now we have faceted applied markers. They are rather dominant. They kind of remind me of blocky markers found in the 1970s, late 1960s. Who's to say whether this ages well in the future? I think it's too early to say, but I love the attention to detail. I love how these grab light, and I love this grooved channel that you see running in the center of the hour appliques. And if you look at the dominant hour hand, there is that same grooved channel that matches perfectly in terms of nominal dimension when it comes to width. And that's just a fun little detail. The more time you spend with this watch, the more you notice the little details and the more you appreciate the craftsmanship and the beauty at play here. Now, it's not perfect. Like, I can look at this and I see the nice frame. I see the nice applied logo. I see the lovely thermally blued seconds hand. But there's one thing that kind of bothers me. And anytime you're critiquing a watch at this level of craftsmanship, at this price, the critiques are largely opinion based. But tell me what you guys think about this. I don't like seeing high beat, 36,080 hours on the dial. I think it's superfluous. I think this comes down to tradition. Watchmakers for decades have been putting advertising on the face of their watches. Hey, this is automatic. Hey, this is how much water resistance this has. Hey, this is a chronometer. Hey, this is the power reserve. And you know what? I don't think it's necessary anymore. Maybe it was in the 1970s, the 1960s, the 1950s, where automatic watches were a relatively new thing. but I think it's superfluous now. And I think this watch would be better if that was just removed entirely. We don't have to put text on the dial just for having text on the dial, right? It's tradition. And I look at my overseas, which just has the logo and it has Swiss made, and that's it, right? There's nothing else. I just enjoy the lovely beauty and execution of this blue dial. This Shirakawa would, I think, be enhanced likewise if we were just looking at the lovely texturized dial without that bit of real estate, text above the 6 o'clock marker. But let me know if I'm being overly nitpicky there, or if you think there's some validity to my comments. Now you can see all of these details under a dome sapphire crystal that has inner anti-reflective treatment. And Grand Seiko has done a great job with the anti-reflective treatment. There's a high level of clarity. And when I hold this next to my Submariner or my Speedmaster or my Overseas, you guys can really see the difference in various lighting situations. And I think that's great. So Grand Seiko's done a great job there. Let's talk about this bracelet. The bracelet's been redesigned. It's thicker. It's more substantial feeling. It has less flex and play. And I think that's a great move. We've long been wanting Grand Seiko to come out with a more satisfying bracelet. And I think they've finally done so. Now, it doesn't have, a sliding micro adjustment system. It doesn't have, a clasp similar to Omega, but we do have 3/4 links. We have good levels of articulation. And for the first time in a Grand Seiko bracelet, the finish is consistent all the way through the sides, the underside, and I think that makes a big difference. And again, when you're spending this level of money on a watch, you don't want to have to live with something. Oh yeah, the bracelet's okay. It could be better. You know what? I think this bracelet's appropriate for this watch. And there's one other thing I'd like to draw your attention to, and that is the finish. Grand Seiko in the past, they've done a lot of Suratsu polishing, which is great because it's a lovely finish. It's dynamic. It's a selling point. But with this white birch, the dominant finish is satin brushing. It's entirely found on the bracelet. It's found on the case sides. It's found on the bezel. The top portion of the bezel is vertical brushing. And I think when the dominant finish is brush, it helps those Suratsu polished areas to pop and enhances them. And I think that's great. So I actually like the fact that this watch carries less Suratsu polishing than the average Grand Seiko. I really do think it helps here. Now let's talk about negative elements of this piece before I give you my final opinions and thoughts. I think the biggest thing is the fact that this is not really legible at a glance. It doesn't excel in that aspect. We see a highly texturized dial. We see, faceted markers, polish. It's silver on white, right? So it's not going to have dive watch levels of contrast, but I think that's okay because I get lost in the beauty. I get lost in the details. And this is not illegible like you would find on a skeletonized watch dial, right? This does have a good level of contrast. It's just not ideal, if that makes sense. It's a trade-off that I think is appropriate for this level of execution, beauty, and how dynamic it is. I'm biased though, guys. I'm a little bit biased. I might be justifying this to a higher degree. You can let me know in the comments section. But I think that's really it. I mean, the bracelet is nice. The case is nice. The dial details, the polishing, the new movement. There are very few things here that I think could be improved. Mainly the text on the dial, and ideally in the future, a micro adjustment system. That would be great to see. So guys, what do you think of this Grand Seiko SLGH005 white birch? Is it worth the money? Hopefully I've been able to answer that question here, just showing the details, showing the watch, pointing out the elements, Grand Seiko tying it into regional nature. The level of art that is at play here is, I think, is exciting as a watch enthusiast. I do think this is worth the money, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. I think those of us that have been in the hobby for, 5-10 years, we remember the days where Grand Seiko wasn't even the dominant signature on the dial. It was Seiko, and Grand Seiko was secondary. And authorized dealers would be very, very competitive in their discounts. Grand Seikos would tank on the secondary market in terms of value retention. We remember the days where Grand Seiko was more of a secret amongst the watch enthusiast community. and it didn't permeate the entire watch market to the degree that it does now. And I think projecting 5, 10, 15 years into the future, Grand Seiko is only going to continue to rise in the amount of respect that they garner. And I think discounts will be few and far between. And there will be watches, there will be models, there will be special releases like this white Birch that have wait lists where you're considered lucky just to get one at retail. I think that's the future for some Grand Seiko. Their brand image is on the rise, and I love to see that as a watch enthusiast. So again, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you're interested in a Grand Seiko, I would definitely recommend the authorized dealer that sold this to my father, Royal Jewelers in Andover, Massachusetts. I'll put their contact information in the description of the video. Their sales staff is not on commission, but I do have a couple people that I recommend you talk to. And if you name drop me, I would appreciate that as well. Let me know if there's a specific Grand Seiko you would like me to review. You can put that in the comments. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you very much for watching today. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.